Herzlich willkommen bei Digitale Optimisten. Ich bin Alex und ich spreche in diesem Podcast mit den Gründern der nächsten Generation, die große Visionen für die Zukunft haben, damit aber noch ganz am Anfang stehen. Heute spreche ich über die Zukunft des Arbeitens. Und zwar nicht darüber, welche Jobs wir machen werden, sondern wie wir arbeiten werden. Die ganzen Lockdowns haben Millionen Arbeitnehmer und vielleicht auch dich ganz persönlich ins Dauer-Homeoffice gezwungen. Wenn es dir geht wie mir, dann fällt dir ab und zu die Decke auf den Kopf, wenn man seine Kollegen nur noch über den Computer on-screen sieht. Brauchen wir also völlig neue Office-Konzepte, die flexibler, offener, unabhängiger sind als das normale Büro, das wir von vor der Pandemie kennen. Was ist dann überhaupt noch das soziale Umfeld im Job? Bestimmt sich das aus den Kollegen, die zufällig für die gleiche Firma arbeiten? Oder sind es in Zukunft vielleicht eher Menschen, die für völlig verschiedene Firmen arbeiten, aber dafür in ähnlichen Bereichen und ähnliche Einstellungen haben wie du? Dieser Gedanke beschäftigt mich sehr und deshalb freue ich mich auch so sehr auf meine heutige Gesprächspartnerin, Cecilia Chiolerio. Cecilia ist die Gründerin von Twostay und sie möchte die Art und Weise, wie wir über unseren Arbeitsplatz nachdenken, nachhaltig verändern. Twostay verwandelt geschlossene Bars und Restaurants, davon gibt es gerade eine ganze Menge, in Coworking Spaces. Ein spannender Twist auf das klassische Coworking und vom Gedanken einer Win-Win-Situation für Arbeitnehmer und Restaurants getrieben. Wie kann man aber so ein Konzept inmitten einer Jahrhundertpandemie ausführen? Und wie lange muss der Atem sein, um mit diesem Konzept erfolgreich zu sein? All das frage ich Cecilia und wie ich finde, gibt sie sehr spannende Antworten darauf. Wenn dir dieser Podcast gefällt, dann erzähle doch bitte einer weiteren Person in dieser Woche davon. Teil 2 mit den Rapid-Fire-Questions kommt wie gewohnt nächste Woche Montag. Aber jetzt erstmal viel Spaß mit Cecilia von Twostay. Cecilia, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
You are very welcome, and I'm really glad to have you on. What I want to understand first, right off the bat, is you were born in Italy. You worked in startups in, I believe, Brazil, Spain, Italy, and London, UK. And now you're in Munich. So what brought you to Germany?
This was actually just life, I guess. I had like super clear ideas of what I wanted to be in life, or at least I thought so, and also where I wanted to live. And then somehow every decision that I took was just like kind of spontaneous. So when I started, I moved to Milan, and for me it was already like a huge step because I'm from a small village close to another city in Italy. So yes, I just tapped into the big city and everything opened up for me, right? So suddenly I could do everything I wanted. I had so much opportunities that before I didn't even know about it. So then Milan was my first step. And then like step by step, I started understanding how much other things were out there. So I spent a little bit time in Brazil. Then I moved to Barcelona for my master. And there were so many German people somehow. Like half of my class, like my master class was from Germany.
Germans are everywhere.
Yeah,
They're just
everywhere.
always everywhere.
But mainly where sun is, I think. So Barcelona was the perfect place
Totally, yeah.
for them. And there is just really about networking. So I started understanding what these people were looking for, which options they had back in their country. Many of them wanted to go back. So I started getting to know them, and I met someone that opened up a bit the Berlin kind of startup world. So I went for a field trip with a group of students, and then I landed on a job in Berlin. There was a AI startup, super small. I learned so much, and I really realized how much I wanted to do this, and I wanted to do this on my own. So I stayed with them for 6 months, and then I moved to Munich for another job in another, I guess, like startup, like a little bit more like bigger. So West Wing, I was working there for a year and a half, and that's where like I think I hit a point where I just stopped learning somehow. and the willingness of doing something on my own was way too big. So I decided to start researching and start, see if there was any option for me to have my own startup. And that's like maybe the question that always comes up there is, why don't you do this in Italy? And that was mainly again because of networking. At the end of the day, like I knew more people here than what I knew in Italy, at least on business side of things. So for me it was the most obvious thing to stay and to try to build it here. Even like I'm not like a master in German, otherwise probably would also do this in German. So it was not easy. Like it was a foreign country, it was a foreign language, but still like I had more inputs from network side.
So I can totally relate to your point about being, well, from a different place and starting like a big chapter of your life in a different country. I think there's always like this 10% extra challenge, right? If you
Yeah.
don't really, if you're not from the country, even though you might be learning or speaking the country. So that's a yeah, courageous and big decision. So how does the startup ecosystem in Munich feel like compared to all the other places that you've experienced? Like, I mean, Barcelona has a vibrant startup community. London obviously does too. I'm not so sure. I don't really know about the Brazilian one, but how does it feel like in Munich?
What I think about Munich is that things are more real. So as a person, I'm a little bit of really practical person, I would say. So I really like when stuff are concrete and really there. I'm not really a fan of bullshit. And I think in Munich, the startup ecosystem, it's really cool because there are people really doing high tech stuff. Like that's not so much of B2C than actually as much as like my startup is, I would say. But I really have so much inputs in like what is really innovation and like really high tech products that I have no clue how people can even think about starting something like this or invent something like this. And I think that's really, really great for me to stay here because it's just like, it's just like 3 steps ahead of everything, stuff that you would not see in other places. And compared to Berlin, I mean, the ideas were always super nice. There was everyone doing so many things and everything really looked possible. But I would say sometimes in more shallow stuff. So it's more B2C or more products that are more, I would say, commercial or like marketing related. And I love to see that part because I'm building something in that side as well. But I also need inputs on another level, and that's I think what Munich gives you. Like it's really high tech scene.
Hmm. So that seems to be like a great new claim for Munich as a startup hub. It's less bullshit than other places. That's
Yeah,
great.
I don't like to put it on a negative term.
No, no, don't worry, don't worry. I
It's
totally
still,
understand you. It's totally fine. I understand what you mean. The deep, yeah, you're right. I mean, I do think there are some deep tech startups in Berlin, but there seems to be more in Munich. Just anecdotally, I think. I don't know. Maybe it's because of the universities and
I
the
think
close
also
stuff. Not really sure. I don't
connection
know how
with
that happened.
industries. I'm pretty sure
Yeah, that's a good
it's like
point.
companies are here are helping startup. It's like a good connection, so it's easy to land on your first customer to get support from companies. I think this could be the main difference.
Mhm. Yeah. So you already mentioned before that you worked at West Wing. So that's I think, one of the biggest furniture e-commerce, well, retailers for furniture. But you worked there for 1.5 years. So you must, at some point, you must have thought to yourself, there is something missing from, from what I want to do. And I kind of know that feeling when you feel that there is also something else out there, and you might have a calling to do your own thing, but you're not quite there yet to make that decision and jump off that and make that big move. So, how did it feel for you personally in in those months or weeks or days running up to that decision of, hey, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to quit my comfortable, my safe job at West Wing.
hmm So first of all, I think I always had this. Like there was not like one day that I didn't think about it, and was not just West Wing, was any job before. And I think I tried it to do many times. So to try to find something on the side of the business I was doing, on the side of the work I was doing every day. And this never worked. Just simply because, I mean, it's a job that would require 120% of your time. So try to make it on 50%. It just doesn't work. At least didn't work for me. So I knew that sooner or later I had to do this as my full-time job or my full-time everything. So when I was at West Wing, there were definitely like the first year was a lot of learning, a lot of like getting into the job, and I like to do things 100%, as I said. So I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to do it my best. But then this pressure really started to feel more urgent, and that's like I also always say this, like I didn't do this alone, because if it was for me, probably I would be still at West Wing. So I always wanted to quit, but I never felt ready. And so when I had this feeling, I called my previous boss, the one from the startup in Berlin, and I knew that he was supporting me. I knew he was believing I could do this. So we sat together like for one day, and he was, okay, Ceci, you can't wait to be ready. So you now decide that you are gonna be ready, and you're gonna be ready in whatever months you decided, and you tell me. And then I decided that in 3 months I would come up with an idea, and quit my job at the moment that I went out of that conference call with him. So I quit my job, and then I took 3 months.
Wow,
Um,
that's great.
and he told me, okay, now you get 3 months, because that's the time frame you decided, because of your money, because of whatever decision you have, or like other responsibility you have in life. So 3 months is a good time for me. And at the end of 3 months, you choose a date, and that's the date when you're gonna found your company. And you tell 3 people that you know that that's your goal. And if you don't, you're gonna disappoint them. So I mean, obviously, this was a tool, but that really was also a mindset and an approach, right? Like, didn't matter like if I was ready or not. I just needed to decide that I was ready. So that's what I did. And then I was sitting there for 3 months looking for ideas. And eventually I managed to found the company the day I decided. Not like super practically, but definitely was like the first idea that I started to work on. And then what is now Twostay in a really different ways, because that's where a lot of iterations in between. But yes, that was the moment where Twostay was born.
That's so cool. Because I mean, obviously on this podcast, I speak to many founders, and many tell me that they had this spark for entrepreneurship kind of in them, and it just needed to come out, you know? And
Mhm.
I always wonder where this spark originates. And sometimes it's from, you know, some people come from very entrepreneurial families, and that's kind of almost in their genes, it seems. And others kind of, I don't know, uh, in at university they are infected by this idea. Was it, which one was it? Was it, did you always know, or was it, you know, studying in different areas and going to Barcelona and being part of the startup scene there already?
I think was definitely a mix of both. I don't come from a entrepreneurial family, but my dad is really entrepreneur himself, like at least in the spirit. And I think he transmitted a lot of this to me. And already when I was 16, he was starting on a side, obviously, of his job, like a furniture company. And I was helping him, and we were all in together already when I was still living at home. And he always had so many ideas and so many things he wanted to do, maybe not as a startup mentality, but more as, yes, as entrepreneur kind of businesses. He is not like, he's not an entrepreneur himself, but I guess like, yeah, kind of mindset, I really got it from him. But when I moved to Milan, maybe there I was still thinking that consulting was my only option. And then maybe Barcelona was when I realized there was so much out there. And then what I could, there was just possible for me to start something and make it happen. And I start realizing that there are tools, there are people that can help you. That's how to fundraise, all these kind of things that before was just like a big black box for me. So I think, yes, spirit maybe was always something that I had, and ideas. I had many. I have this list of ideas that I carry on since I'm like, I think 18 or so. Even like there are many, there's super much bullshit, but I always keep implementing it. But I think I never thought, okay, that's something I could do as a living. And that was when I met people that were doing this, and they were super inspiring. And yes, I just decided that I could be one of them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's good. That's a really cool story, and it's a wonderful tool of actually, helping you make that jump and working up the courage to make that jump. Is to say, I'm going to tell 3 people that I'm going to do this. I'm going to take 3 months, and after those 3 months, I'm going to have my concept and my idea. So let's talk about that concept. Your company is called Twostay,
Yes.
and we brushed over it a little bit. What you're doing. So I always like to ask the question: how do you explain what you do at Twostay to a 10-year-old? And what's your answer to that question?
Okay. Yes. So maybe the 10-year-old would not know what co-working is.
Okay, let's assume he does. That's a
Um,
good point.
but yes, I think a lot of people don't know what co-working is, because we have in mind like big giants sharing, like making office for companies to share. But at Tuesday, we work more with another kind of customers, and that's mainly freelancers and remote workers. So those are individual people that want to have an office. They don't have office themselves, and they usually do home office, or they work in cafes. So Tuesday is kind of a hybrid solution, so where we offer them a functional space where to work in a flexible manner. So it's still like based on a monthly membership or day membership or half a day membership. So people can just go there, drop in, and start working with Wi-Fi and coffee and other people. So that's the important part of Tuesday. What we provide is also a community where people can belong, can have colleagues that they usually don't have in their everyday work. Um, and what we like to do is that actually that's a normal co-working space, right? But how we manage to keep it flexible, keep it cheap, is that we use spaces that during the day are not used by other people. And that's mainly restaurants and bars when they're closed. We take care of them. So the places are just open for co-working spaces. We kind of make it sure that the place is a good and functional work environment, and then we turn it into a Tuesday space by day. So that's a bit the combo of these underused spaces, plus the need of these people to have office which is affordable and flexible for 1, 2, 3 days a week, or there are people that comes also every day as a normal office.
Got it. Interesting. So basically, you're building a new way of co-working, which you say is more flexible, cheaper, and possibly more fun. So let's kind of dive into the business model a bit. And if I understand correctly, you basically operate a two-sided market. You have the hosts on the one hand; those are hotels, bars, art galleries, whatever that have some kind of space that they want to utilize.
Mm-hmm.
And you have the guests on the other hand. So as you said, mainly remote workers, freelancers, self-employed people.
Correct.
So let's kind of talk about the first side, the host side. What's your pitch to these hotels and bars and art galleries? How do you get them interested in your idea?
Mm-hmm. So I'm not a salesperson. Usually, it's like my co-founder. No, I'm kidding. But so the main thing that we pitch to them is definitely the mission. So to make our city more a place where you really want to live in, and not to leave spaces empty, because we are running out of spaces, and that's just a pity when you have a beautiful pretty space in the middle of the town and you close it every like for 12 hours. That's just making no sense for us. So that's really what we want our partner to be on board, that they are on a pretty big project where really we think that we had to use the spaces in a more sustainable way. So that's definitely the first pitch. And when people understand this, that's a business side of it, right? So it's always yeah, if you leave your space completely empty, then you get no money whatsoever, and you get no visibility whatsoever. If you get a two-stay space out of it, instead we pay kind of a rent. It's not legally a rent, but something, obviously you get more revenues. They are stable revenues that in a restaurants or bars business is not something that is really obvious, because you have a lot of ups and downs. Maybe some nights they're good, some months they're good, while for us is always like a base stable revenues. And you get a lot of visibility, because you have people that are sitting in your place every day. They talk about it, they invite their friends, and obviously we do tons of marketing for them, right? Like, to make the place full, we have to run ads, we have to flyer, we have to talk about the space. And this is something that you would just don't get if your space is there closed with lights off every day. So that's a little bit the two things we always try to pitch while opening up a new space. And the other side of things is that really process that you have to change is basically nothing. So we cover for I would say expenses that could be a plus, so electricity, water, and so on. But you have to change nothing about it, because we take care of the keys, we take care of that someone is in the place. Even sometimes for bars, they maybe want to have deliveries during the day. They don't want to be in the space all day. We are there. So it's really like a why not kind of question.
Yeah, understood. So if I would have a bar and I would open it, let's say, I don't know, at 6 p.m. every night, and you would approach me and say, "Hey, you know what? Why don't you turn that unused space until 6 p.m. into a co-working space
Mhm.
for whatever time you'd like?" Then you would actually pay a rent to that bar, to my bar in that case, and would send someone over who would, be there and serve some, I don't know, some drinks, I don't know, be there and service the place. Is that correct?
Yes, we run. It's called kind of, we call it Space Captains. It's an ambassador program. So if you take care of two-stay space during the day, then you just get the month for free. So you have a responsibility of getting two shift per week, and you just have to be there, be a good host, making sure that nothing is happening, switch on the lights, making sure that the plugs and sockets are there, and in exchange you get to work there for free. So those are people that we trust. There are people that applied to be space captain that we make sure that are good people and they're responsible. And that's also what we sell to the bar. That someone from our extended team would always be there.
I remember a couple of months ago, before the whole coronavirus thing started,
Mhm.
I went outside to go to work, and I thought to myself, this is so stupid, right? Because now I leave my home vacant
Mhm.
for, I don't know, whatever, 8 hours, 10 hours, whatever I had to work that day, and I go to the office to work there, and then I leave the office at whatever time in the evening and leave that vacant for the next whatever 12 hours, and I'm at home again. So it's like super stupid to have 50% of space always wasted. And
This
generally, what you're doing is, how can we increase utilization and efficiency of scarce space that we have in cities like Munich and Berlin and wherever, and make that more valuable to people that need space and people that have ample space.
exactly. And then I think also something that you raise as with your comment just now is that there's also a lot of time you spend in commuting, right? And I don't know how it works for you, but Munich also has a lot of cities around, and not everyone lives in the city, right? So spending every day 1 hour to go to your office, this is something that I think new generation just don't want to do. So if you have the options to have a two-stay space in your city, and that you can use 2 3 times a week instead of going to the office that is maybe on the other side and takes you so much, this is just also time that you save for yourself and for other things in your life.
Mhm. And I might get better coffee than when I go to the office. What? So that makes, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? If I'm a bar and you tell me, hey, open up, I can open up a new revenue stream for you. You don't even have to, take care of it. We do that with our space captain model. Great name, by the way. Sounds like I'm a space pilot or something. Um, but what's the number one objection you get from hotels that you have to deal with when you approach not only hotels, but all the hosts that you approach?
Um, there are different kind of objections that we get in different time of the sales funnel. I think the biggest one is really not understanding the concept of co-working, and that's like for us already a really big no-go when it comes out to sell to a place. Like if you don't understand what those people are gonna be doing all day in your space, then it's really hard for us to sell anything after this. So that's a bit the main thing, and I think this is just also kind of like a matter of time until like really this co-working concept is well known and people really start realizing how many people are working this way, and that is not just something for IT guys as used to be, I would say. But that's definitely the number one objections, like kind of things like, yeah, why would people stay in my place on a laptop all day, right? So that's a bit something that for us is really hard to overcome if this happens. The second objections that we get is in terms of processes. Like I think many of these bar owners are having a lot of like structure, routine process that they're doing like this for years. So at the beginning could be really scaring if something like, oh, they take care of my space during the day, and yeah, I don't know how to walk in anymore, these kind of things. So obviously we have answers ready for each of those questions. And the third question is always about what about something happened. So it's really important for us to have an insurance that can help the restaurant owner or the bar owner in case something happens during co-working times. And this is something we offer to them, and that's usually a big incentive to help them decide for turning the space into stay.
Sometimes when I walk down San Francisco or Berlin, or I mean, every major city, you always see these coffee shops and you see people on laptops working there. And you can almost always tell that they're on, I don't know, their first cup of coffee and they're sipping on it for 5 hours and they don't turn over any revenue for the coffee shop.
Yeah.
And I wonder, is that also a pain point that you might address with your model, or are you strictly going after these places that don't utilize their space during the daytime?
Okay, so this is also something that a question that we received a lot, and that's a little bit how Tuesday was born, right? I was really working in this way, and working in cafes, you end up doing this, right? Like you just buy a coffee, you sit there for ages, and then most of the time you even like feel super unwelcome because obviously people start being pissed at you
Yeah,
that you're
totally.
there, and just like, yeah, make the space full and not getting enough revenues for them. So I really think as a bar, having this kind of concept, like people working there every day, it's not cool, it's not something that can make the owner happy. And that's something that we leverage a lot, not in terms of scouting spaces, but in terms of finding new customers. So usually what we do is that we really map in the city the places where people work in this way, so in bars or cafes or these kind of things. And then we try to run affiliates program with the bar owners, so they usually are not happy that people with the laptop staying there. So we ask them to refer them to stay, and they get a percentage on whoever customers they can bring us. So that's how we use these places. In terms of like scouting for locations, what we really think is that to stay in comparison to a bar, it's a working space. So you don't have kids running around screaming while you have a conf call, or you don't have like Starbucks vibe or tourists buying Starbucks cups while you are trying to have investor meeting or so. It's really a place where other people are just working, and you don't have distraction of any other leisure type. And I think that's the big difference. While also cafes, yes, are nice to work in, but not for long term, not always. And yes, they just simply are not a workspace.
Got it. Makes sense. So it's really about the co-working, not about, just monetizing a desk that you might have at a coffee shop.
No,
Understood.
I mean,
Hmm.
we did this at the beginning, right?
Hmm.
So at the beginning, Tuesday was a system to book your table on a coffee shop, like in a place where you would feel welcome to work in. And we set up everything, and we had like I think 25 to 30 cafes in Munich where you could book your spot, reserve it, go there, and work all day. And I swear we didn't get any booking whatsoever. Like we ran it for 6 months, so much effort. We had to drag people in, try it, and see, hey, look how cool our product is. Nothing, just didn't work. And that's something that we realized later. I think there were two main reasons why this didn't work. First is exactly what I mentioned before, because it was not a workspace. So if they wanted to go to a cafe, they went on their own. They just got a coffee and stayed there half a day. So they didn't really need a booking system for it. And the second part that maybe can seem shallow for someone that doesn't work this way, but how important is to have people around you that work in the same way as you do, that you can meet for lunch, that you can have a coffee break with. These in cafes, it's really hard that something like this happens, because yeah, you're in a cafe, right? It's not so easy to walk over someone and just say, hey, want to have a chat or so. While in the co-working place, that's it's really a community, right? So we put a lot of effort to for them to meet and to exchange. So then they go for lunch or coffee breaks, and that's really a plus to your day. There was some days when I was working in cafes, and I felt super alone. So for 1 month, I forced myself to talk to one person every day, like no matter who. Like I was sitting there, and I had to say at least 2 or 3 sentences to someone sitting in front of me for 1 month. And that was really cool, because at least I spoke to someone. But it's something that doesn't come out naturally, I think.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that feeling. There were parts of sometimes when I worked at coffee shops. I don't know, when I wrote something, or I don't know, did something for my own on my own. Then I can totally relate. You don't feel, and then you have this feeling of not feeling welcome because you know you're hogging this table for 2 hours at the window, looking out and thinking about whatever you were doing. I can totally understand. And what a genius move to include to turn these frustrated coffee shop owners into your salespeople and giving them a little Tuesday card to refer them to you. That's really smart.
Yeah, it's just because we know how pissed they get, right? Like,
Yeah,
you
totally.
have
I
no
would get
clue how
pissed.
many times I've been kicked out of places because it was too loud in conference calls and so on. It was
Mm.
really embarrassing.
So then the big question becomes, how do you turn a bar or an art gallery or a hotel bar into a co-working space over day? Because you have to kind of revert it at night or in the evening again.
hmm So we use places that are ready to be converted. So it's usually places that have seats, that have nice table to work, also with a good height for your back and so on. And that's what we do. It's just bring in a Twostay box, which is literally a Twostay box, where inside is our Wi-Fi. It's a plug and play solution. So we plug it in the morning, we plug it out in the afternoon. So it's also safer. It's not the line from the bar. So also if you have any issue with your personal work and so on, it's a good Wi-Fi. It works. And then we do the same with sockets, so that every table is more or less served with power for your laptop, for your phone. And we have a small coffee station where we just put it up in the morning, we put it out in the evening, and signs for outdoor customers to see it and to see what's happening in the moment and so on. And everything is put up in the morning by the space captain, and then tied up in the evening by the space captain that needs to close the space. And outside of every space, we have a key box as well. So it's a safety box where we store the key, or if we're lucky, the space has a Wi-Fi key. And that's, we don't need to exchange keys among the owners every day. The owner doesn't need to be there to open the space and so on. So it's really like a light solution where we don't change anything on the space, but we just make sure that it's just got better and more functional for working purposes.
Interesting. So I can see how the I can see the complexities, what you must be dealing with, right? Because you have the hardware side, you have a software side, you have obviously the marketing and sales side. And I wonder, I mean, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and COVID-19 and the impact that had on your business in a bit. But let's imagine for a second that this was not an issue, right? And we were still in the uh, pre-COVID-19 world. What does it need? What are the obstacles, or what would be the boost to really scaling on the host side for you for Tuesday?
Okay, so we have a way of scaling up which is not directly from the host. So how we do it to scale it, we turn it into more franchise business. So we're looking up for people that want to open their own space in whatever city they need the space for, and then together with them we look for space. So for us, the first step to scale the business is looking for what we call them community host. So there are people that are exactly like an Airbnb host, but then they want to set up a co-working in someone else restaurants or bars. And what we need is just like tons of those people, because once we have them, it's easy for us to scout for space because we do it together with them, and they're usually expert in the city they're in, right? Imagine if they would ask you, okay, open a co-working space in a bar in your city. You know where to go, you know how the space looking like, you know which spaces are closed during the day, you can walk in, do your sales pitch and so on. So that's what we usually rely on them to do, the sales pitch as well. Obviously, we support them with marketing material, sales material. If it's needed, we take over part of the sales process. But the first step is looking for the people that want to open and start a Tuesday in a new city.
It's almost like offering someone a kind of income stream and telling them, hey, you know what, become a what do you call it? Co-working host, I believe. Community host. Be a community host with Tuesday, and you can basically own that space. And do they get a share of revenue? What happens to them? And do they become the space captains then?
So they get a share of revenues. So that's what we really want to do, is making those people entrepreneurs themselves, right? Maybe it's not going to be their main job with one space only, but if maybe they want to open two, or still is like a side revenues from their normal like job, and they usually are freelancer themselves, right? So they maybe have, I don't know, photography business, or they are copywriters or whatever. So Tuesday is just like added revenues for them, for their normal income.
So it's a bit like a franchise model then.
Exactly, but a franchise where we take over on the risk and to pay the location as well. They can decide to be on the space every day. In this case, they don't need any space captain, or they can just decide to get as many space captain they need in order to cover the space and to have someone in the location every day.
So how has the pandemic and COVID-19, how has that impacted your business?
Uh, I mean, a co-working business in a pandemic, it's really like the business you don't want to have. But that was a bit our thinking at the beginning. So when this started, for us was really like, oh my God, like it was in the worst moment this could happen, because we were trying to expand. We were really on a good track. We had so many customers, was everything really good. And then from one day to another, we had to just like we had to sit there and decided what to do, right? The main problem for us that we had no guidelines as well. So many co-working spaces never closed. And that's I would say also a business kind of choice, because obviously if you have monthly users and you close a space, then you have to give money back to them. But for us, it's a hybrid model. So should I follow the regulation of office, or should I follow the regulations of bars and restaurants? In that case, I had to close everything. So at the end of the day, we decided that we were caring too much about the safety of our users and customers and community. So we decided to close all the spaces, and we remained closed for 3 months. So said like this, it looked like was a really big disaster, and actually was, because we didn't have any revenues for 3 months, not even 1 cent. But on the other end, since we run such a asset light kind of co-working, for us was really also no cost whatsoever, because for the locations we have what we pay is not a rent, but is a right to use. So the moment that locations are closed and we don't use it, we didn't have to pay the rent as well. So that was a big help for us. And obviously we closed all the things, how you would say in Italy. So there was no
Mm.
marketing activity going on. Really, our cost was basically just went down to our salary cost, and that's it. So we really managed to keep as much as oxygen for then opening up stronger. And that's actually what we did. So for us, Corona now is not a bad thing somehow. We're still operating way less spaces than what we used to do, at least in Munich. But we spent Corona in really looking for these people we were talking about before. So this community host, and we found like we had during Corona 50 leads just with one simple Facebook post, and now we're opening 7 locations all over Germany. So for on this sense also was really good, and on the other part is also to open up for us a market that before we really believed in but was never really there, and that's about remote workers, so people that are doing home office but they are full-time employees. And before I always believed in this a lot because I really think that's the future, that's how we're gonna work. I don't think any of us will go to office 9 to 5 every day, commuting 1 hour in the next years or even months. But that was always just like my strong belief and never really something that we saw from our customer base. And now it's completely different. There are so many people that are sick of home office that they come once or twice because they just need to get out, or maybe they have kids at home, or maybe they don't have a proper desk, proper Wi-Fi at home, so they need a co-working space.
I, that's the thing that I find so interesting about your business model. First off, hats off to you for staying optimistic and seeing the opportunity that comes with such a drastic change. I sometimes think that when I talk to founders, I come to the conclusion that coronavirus is kind of like a meteor that has struck the earth, and now everyone has to deal with the new realities of business, and things are shifting in terms of consumption patterns, also in terms of what is important to people, right? And old ways of thinking are kind of broken up, and some things are kind of thought anew in a way. So when we talked about this two-sided market, and if you think about it from an opportunistic perspective, you could also say, hey, those hosts, those hotels and bars, they need new streams of revenue. They need to really think about how to get people in the door, right? So the things, the obstacles, the objections that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago when you pitched pre-corona, um, I'm pretty sure people might be thinking, hey, you know what? We have to actually know what remote working is, and this might be an opportunity stream for us. And on the other side, on the guest side, that we haven't talked too much about yet, but it's the same thing, right? I mean, I heard that Google announced it will not open until July of 2021,
Yes.
right? And I mean, that brings up whole new questions of is it even reasonable to do this commute, as you mentioned? Is it good to be working at one space and then going back to the other space for half the time? So there seems to be something fundamentally shifting in the space of work, and you seem to have an really interesting tool that might satisfy that shifting consumer demand.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure if I'm super optimistic on Corona really changing stuff. I think it was probably not like this lockdown, not as long as like to really change people habits. But what I'm extremely sure is that it just accelerated behavior, right? Like from one day to another you had to find different ways of doing things, and then from one day to another you also realize that it's just better the way you do it now, right? Because it's more digital, because it's more efficient, because you just don't waste your time in things that before you just maybe put as a priority. And yeah, I just think for us, for this model, our model, but also many others would really show if they can work and if there are a solution for this new kind of way of work or doing other stuff.
Mhm. But I do think that's kind of the beauty of startups and talking to entrepreneurs. I mean, if someone would come to me and say, "Hey, you know what do you think about investing or doing a startup about co-working?" I would probably say, "Oh my God, I'm really not sure if this is the best idea." But if you think about it, and kind of think about both sides, both users that you have, you can actually see opportunity coming from it, and that's what I find interesting. Even from our conversation.
Yeah.
But I do want to shift the focus a little bit to the guest side.
Mhm.
So basically, remote workers, freelancers trying to look for a place to work. Let's kind of take a step back. Can you tell me what options do they have now? I mean, apart from being in their office at home or in their kitchen or in their living room.
Yeah, so many of our users still work in other places. So they like really to change and Swift, and that's mainly cafes. So that's really the bars that you used to say before. And then our main competitors, if we want to talk it in these terms, if is normal co-working spaces. And when I refer to normal co-working spaces, that's mainly two side business. One is like those big chains that like everyone knows, like WeWork, Mindspace, and that's mainly for companies. That's mainly if you already have a team. Yes, you can have a hot desk. It's super expensive compared to our monthly rent, or that's more family owned, as we call it, co-working space. So this is usually like just in one city, that usually have one space, is really like super family vibe inside. That's the host always there, the owner always there, and maybe you can find a little bit cheaper pricing. And I think something else that for us is a big difference is that all these places, they usually only have a monthly ticket. So if you are a freelancer, you can decide to buy your ticket and stay there every day of your month in that space, right? And then everyone that is around you will more or less do the same. So after 3 months, you know everyone by heart. You know how they eat the sandwich, how they drink their coffee, how they sit, how they move, everything, right? Because you work together with them for every day for 3 months, and you don't have any, I don't know, new inputs. While for us, while having these day passes and half a day passes really allow people to have a routine. Yes, you have people that are always there. They come really often, maybe every day. But then every day you have someone new, someone that is just dropping for the day or for the half a day. And then if you're lucky, you talk to him, and someone that is doing something completely opposite of what you were doing. Or maybe it's even someone that you needed to find a new client or whatsoever. So I think it's really about getting more inputs in your work life. And that's something that happens in co-working, but I think way less than what happens in Tuesday.
You mentioned WeWork. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's certainly the thing that comes to mind when I think about co-working spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a very rough year, I think, 2020. They imploded spectacularly.
Mm-hmm.
So does that have any effect on your work? Does it, because you mentioned that it's sometimes hard to sell hosts on remote work and co-working. So, or is that another opportunity if you can come after a slice of the people that work in WeWork? So not those small little companies, but individual people that might be working for alternatives.
Yeah, definitely. Like they have a lot of our potential customer in the spaces when it comes to freelancer. So for us, it's definitely cool to manage to, yeah, sell the opportunities for them as well. In terms of this WeWork situation, how affected us. Yeah, I think what I think it made co-working way more known, and that for us was just a really good thing. So either for better or for worse, someone start knowing co-working that before he had no clue about it, because it was on the media, because was like obviously something really important that happened, and people start talking more about it, and also realizing, I think, the potential of it. But then I also think that yeah, co-working, it could be a hard business model if it's not done in the proper way, right? So sometimes for us it's really useful to run the comparison with WeWork, mainly because of the business model, right? Because everything that they do, we do it in the opposite way. So the cash flow, it's completely opposite of ours. Their asset is like their main focus, while for us is nothing. So um, yeah, for us it was really good to try to have a better sales also when talking to investors, when talking to maybe even new spaces, trying to make understand how we do things in a different way. So we still think that co-working is not the problem, but how you run co-working may be a problem if it's not done in the right way.
How is Tuesday doing now? So you said that you had to kind of freeze your operations a little bit during the, the high times of the pandemic, and now you're kind of kicking back into gear.
Mm-hmm.
But how are you doing now? How do you make money at all? What's the business model? How do you charge? And yeah, generally, where do you stand in your journey?
Mm-hmm. So at the moment, we have opened two spaces, and we are rolling out the opening of the next seven in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So there's going to be interesting weeks ahead. Before Corona, we had more. Our revenues are definitely affected by Corona, but we still have substantial users. So what we do is that we charge, I mean, the prices is like €6 half a day, €12 for the day, and 95 for the month. So that's our revenue streams. When someone comes, they book on our platform, they buy a ticket, and that's counting as our own revenues. And then we share this with our community host. Plus, we pay the spaces. And so that's a bit how the business model works. We also have additional revenues for events, for workshops, for meeting rooms, everything like a normal co-working space would do. So this is other stuff that we do for marketing reasons, so to have more people in the space to see it, to see if that's the right space for them, but also obviously to have additional revenue streams.
That
Uh,
sounds like reasonable prices, huh? For a business model that you need to you will be sharing revenues with these community hosts and stuff. So I mean, how big do you see this business getting? How big is the market, and how what are your projections in your business models?
Yeah, so what we really see is we believe Twostay to be a solution for every kind of cities. So our big goal is to have one Twostay space every 20,000 inhabitants. And that's because there are more freelancers and more people working in this way that you could ever imagine. Like there are statistics now saying that there are 46 million freelancers just in Europe working this way. But who knows what happens with new corona, with employees started working this way as well. And we really see Tuesday to be a solution also for smaller reality, not just big hubs like Berlin or Munich or any big city you would imagine, but for really smaller ones where people are living and they have to commute to the city every day. That's a perfect spot for Tuesday, and maybe not for a big co-working chain, because for us what it makes sense is just to have a space that is big enough to host some co-workers and someone that wants to run it. That's it. That's not nothing that we have to lose. And for us to make a space profitable, we pay a really small right to use. That's just mainly to cover the expensive that the location will have for having us in. So it really makes sense to have Tuesday everywhere. And that's a bit our goal, to have Tuesday in every A and B and C city in the next 5 years in Europe.
I mean, a Tuesday for every 20,000 inhabitants. That sounds like an idea or a lofty goal, big goal
Mm-hmm.
that venture capitalists love. These kinds of big goals, and because it sounds like a lot of money for them. How do venture capitalists, or in general, people who invest into startups like yours, how do they react to your business? And how have you already collected a seed round?
We run a pre-seed round, so just with business angels. And yes, so we I guess we tried to sell to VCs, but also in moments where we were probably not ready. And I think we spoke with some. And obviously, I think for VC, we have to prove still a lot. So I think the main thing that someone would come up with is like, okay, how scalable is Twostay? And that's exactly what we want to prove, right? We're opening now 7 locations in 2 weeks, and we never been to the city. We have no connections there. We don't know these people, and we basically open 7 locations when like a normal co-working would not even plan 1-2 rooms of their own co-working space. So for me, that's a bit the definition of scalable. And I really think when, yeah, I can answer your question when we will try to approach VCs, that I guess will be in the next year, so not now, unless, I mean, we are about to start a round, but we still want to have some good expertise and partner on board, and then have a proper seed round in the next year. So maybe we can talk again and I can answer your question when we really present the model to VCs.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. So, I mean, we started this conversation with you telling me that, you took 3 months off and you thought about a business idea and you probably evaluated different kinds of business ideas. And now you've been working on this for a little bit.
Hmm.
So, if you could talk to yourself back, when you said, "Hey, I'm telling 3 family members and friends that I'm going to found my own company and I'll give myself 3 months to do it. I'm going to find the right business model." Is there something that you would tell yourself? Is there something that you would have loved to known during that time of ideating and searching and discovering ideas for your business?
To be really patient. I think that's really a skill you need to have, and it's not also so much part of me, but really like how much I changed the idea of Tuesday. Like as where like if now I can tell you the idea that I present these people I cared about was a way to rebuild underused or abandoned locations into some sort of co-living spaces. So that was my initial Tuesday idea, and that from there I came out with like so many iterations, and also I realized so many things like, okay, good, you're not neither architect or engineer, so how you have the expertise to do so. And on the other hand, yeah, like how you have no capital whatsoever to even think about rebuild one of these locations. So I think it's really a lot about doing something that you know a lot about, and that for me was like the new way of working. Definitely I spent those 3 months working in this way a lot, and I knew a lot about this. So then something came up in me, and like really having a solution for something that I really realized was a super real problem, something that I even felt myself. And that was really a big help. So I really think as a suggestion needs to be like, I think it's a combination of be patient enough and also flexible in your mind enough. Because if you are too stubborn in pursuing your idea that you think that's the best out ever because you had it in a, I don't know, like a revelation night, then this doesn't is not gonna work. So you have to be able and ready to change it so many times, and because you receive inputs, because you test it, because you talk about it so many times and people will tell you that maybe it doesn't work. So yes, it's just like not something that happens from one day, like doesn't happen overnight, right? So it's
Hmm.
really useful for you to stick there and have enough time, but also enough, yeah, power to just stick with it and just try to find the right one.
I love that you talk about flexibility in your answer because I mean we've been talking for quite some time now, and I feel that a key theme that seems to drive you is flexibility. I mean, you've been working in a lot of different companies, different countries. You were super flexible in your way of finding yourself and finding your idea and your voice. And now you sell flexibility in your own company with Tuesday, right? Because it's more flexible, it's
Mhm.
cheaper, it's more fun than other co-working spaces. So I wonder, was it hard for you to lose that flexibility when you decided to tie yourself to your own startup?
Oh, I don't think I ever lost my flexibility in the sense that I really have way more flexibility on the things I do now that I would ever imagine in every other job, right? Like my day, it's made of like so many different tasks that I had no options to explore in a normal job, right? So there are days where I do marketing, then fundraising, then financials. Like there's so many different topics in one day, so that's for me really flexible. And I think being flexible doesn't mean that you have to, or like that you're not taking on responsibility. So for me, there are two things that are really key ingredients if you want to have your own company, whatever this is. Yes, you need to be flexible because you need to be, I don't know, I think I always use this word in, but it's in Italian, so I don't know it in English. But
Go for it.
like when this material, you need to be able to bend and to maybe stretch, and sometimes instead to reduce yourself, like in the situation you're in, right? So you have to
Elastic. Is that something?
exactly, or
Mm,
resistant. I think that's a,
mm.
yeah, I don't know. But yes, but to be able to do this, you have to be, yes, flexible, but you also have to have a lot of stored energy and power, and a lot of like willingness not to give up, because flexibility, yes, sometimes makes you just decided to leave stuff behind, and that's fine if these it's step towards the end goal. And I think that's always a combination of the two, right? Like stuck with what you decide you want to do, but then be flexible on the path towards it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So when you go to work tomorrow morning, what is the biggest challenge that you currently have on your mind when you think about Tuesday?
It's, I think that's the main challenge, is like how to survive, right? And it comes out to have enough money to manage to stay alive more, and then to raise more money and so on. So I think that's the main biggest challenge that as an entrepreneur you have, that you want to keep your company alive as much as possible, and you have to make everything possible to do so. And that's something that you definitely wake up in the morning worry about, if you are like us in like a moment where you have to raise new funds or stuff like this. So I think that's mainly the biggest challenge we have at the moment. But I would say that every month it's a little bit a different one. So yeah.
Okay, so it's under the umbrella of survival mode. It's sometimes it can be go to market, sometimes it can be the product, or it can be fundraising. Understood.
Yes.
Hier ist wieder Alex und hier sind meine 3 Learnings aus diesem Gespräch mit Cecilia. Erstens, digitale Nomaden werden vielleicht Mainstream. Mit Remote Work, Homeoffice und so weiter dringt eine Nische immer weiter in den Mainstream, nämlich das digitale Nomadentum. So bezeichnen sich Leute, die wie Nomaden, ja, ohne festen Wohnsitz über die Welt ziehen und für wechselnde Arbeitgeber, aber auch manchmal für sich selbst arbeiten. Aber wo bleibt der soziale Aspekt? Ich kann mir vorstellen, dass es irgendwann auch langweilig wird, wenn man zum 100. Mal den tollsten Strand in Thailand sieht. Und Twostay will genau diesen sozialen Aspekt verbessern. Zweitens, die Bedeutung von Asset-Light Businesses. Cecilia erzählt, wie ich finde, sehr eindrucksvoll davon, dass sie nicht 1 Cent Umsatz gemacht hat über weite Strecken, weil sie natürlich von der Pandemie betroffen war und ist. Das war aber deshalb kein existenzielles Problem für sie, weil sie den vorhandenen Raum von Bars und Restaurants einfach nutzt, ohne ihn zu besitzen. Das ist ein bisschen so wie Airbnb, die keine eigenen Wohnungen besitzen und gleichzeitig der größte Anbieter von Übernachtungen in der Welt sind. Damit können Airbnb und auch Twostay ihre Downside viel besser covern, weil sie zum Beispiel keine Instandhaltungskosten haben und gleichzeitig viel besser skalieren. Drittens, Judo-Taktik für Marketing. Ich habe vorher nicht drüber nachgedacht, aber für Coffeeshops sind Kunden nun mal ein echtes Problem, die den ganzen Tag da rumsitzen, einen Tisch blockieren und eine Tasse Kaffee und vielleicht noch einen Muffin am Nachmittag bestellen. Ich habe mich an der Stelle ein bisschen schuldig gefühlt, denn es gab Phasen in meinem Leben, da war ich genauso jemand und ich habe mich immer ein bisschen schuldig gefühlt, wenn ich ehrlich bin. Cecilia nutzt diesen Umstand und lässt Coffeeshops diese Leute zu Twostay referen. Ein wirklich smarter Move für Marketing, ein Judo-Move für Marketing, der eine Win-Win-Situation kreiert. So viel von dieser Folge von Digitale Optimisten. Du erreichst mich unter alexander@digitaleoptimisten.de und wir hören uns wieder nächsten Montag. Bis dahin.